ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jeff Ross, Jeffrey Paul Ross, right?
There you go.
Getting the name correct.
There's too many Jeff Rosses in the entertainment industry in LA, so I got to use my full name sometimes.
Yeah, every time we look you up, there's a comedian, Jeff Ross.
Yeah,
comes up,
and I'm funnier than he is.
I don't have. I've known you as Jeff Ross, Jeffrey P. Ross, and now Jeffrey Paul Ross. So
the producer of the Conan O'Brien show's name is Jeff Ross, and that's how Jimmy Vivino remembers me.
That's right. I wonder if it's the same comedian.
Yeah.
So, okay. Today we are going to interview. This is my first interview with an artist. I haven't done this. I've been wanting to do this for a long time. My name is Cadillac Zack. For those of you who may or may not know of me, this is going to go on YouTube and various other platforms. So I produced a lot of concerts in Los Angeles. Some people may know me from that. But I'm imagining if this reaches beyond Los Angeles, there'll be a lot of people that don't know who the hell I am. So I just figured I would mention who I did, only because this is the first video interview that I've done with a great artist. So I figured I'd mention who I am first. Now we will spend the rest of the time dissecting the life of this phenomenal blues and beyond musician named Jeffrey P. Ross. So first of all, let's talk about the elephant in the room. How are you doing during the pandemic? You doing
it's a thing.
Yeah.
You know,
Not only have all the gigs dried up, but everything is dried up. So nobody's doing nothing.
Yeah.
So just hanging out. Anyway, it's the perfect opportunity for us to launch something like this. I'm looking forward to getting to know you. We have crossed paths actually for over 20 years. I first met you at the Babe and Ricky's Jam. You would not remember this, but back in '97, when they reopened Babe and Ricky's. I know this because I had just moved here from Chicago, and they had just reopened it. I think around March or April of '97.
And that's the one in Leimert Park.
Yeah,
the fancy one.
Yeah, the last incarnation.
Okay.
Several different locations before, but you came walking in on a jam night. I happened to be like up there on stage, and they put us together, and we jammed. I can't remember what the hell happened, but you got all the applause. So, and I had heard of you, heard of you at that point, but I think you had just moved back to LA from somewhere, and ever since then you have always been an elusive mystery. Because I think not long after that, you had moved away. I'm not going to be doing all the talking. I'm going to let you talk, but this is still part of the introduction. So this is just an intro leading up to some of my questions for you. And what I really want to know from artists is I really want to talk about the music, and what inspired you, and, kind of in a chronological order, what you were first exposed to that really turned you on.
Okay.
So let's start chronologically. Where you were born and raised?
I was born in Tucson, Arizona in 1952. We left when I was a year old. We lived in Fontana and then Ontario. And Ontario is where I grew up and went all through school. And, as a young adult, right around the time I turned 21 and maybe like a year before, I started playing in the country bars. But that wasn't my first love. My first love has always been the blues. But my story's so similar to like every baby boomer my age. I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan when I was 11. Then I got into the Stones, but we didn't like, me and my buddies, we didn't like the hits. We liked the album stuff. And we realized later that the stuff that we liked was the blues, the Jimmy Reed tunes, and, things like that. But when I finally decided that I was going to be a guitar player, my friend Errol Brown, who I hadn't seen in a year, my sophomore year in high school, brought me two albums to listen to, and that was the first Paul Butterfield album with Sam Lay with the Silver Boots, and the Beano album, John Mayall with Eric Clapton.
Mm-hmm.
And I took those records home, and this is what I'm doing, and so I started collecting all the British blues things, and I would read the liner notes on the LPs, and they would talk about people like Otis Rush and Buddy Guy. Who are those people? Howlin' Wolf. Oh yeah, I remember like a couple of years before that, the Stones had Howlin' Wolf on Shindig. And I did remember that, and I knew that Howlin' Wolf was responsible for Little Red Rooster, which was probably my favorite Stones song. Back in those, I was 14. I didn't know any better. So that went on for a year or so. And then my buddies and I drove into LA to see Cream at the Shrine, and the original James Cotton Blues Band with Luther Tucker opened the show. And they just destroyed me. I didn't even want to see Cream, and I talked my buddies into staying for the second show so we could see James Cotton again. And I went backstage and I talked to Luther Tucker, and he's looking at me and he goes, "How old are you?" I said, "I'm 16. He starts laughing. He goes, "Well, I'm exactly twice your age." So I immediately became a big Luther Tucker fan. But that kind of opened my eyes, and I started seeing where this music really came from, the music that I dug,
Right.
And I'm just this dumb white guy out in the suburbs, that doesn't know anything. But I know what I like. So
So the Cream was probably what, 65, 66?
what now?
That Cream concert with Tucker and
No, it was actually 10 days before my 16th birthday. It was in March of 1968.
okay.
Yeah. 65, I think it was 65, Clapton was still with John Mayall in those days.
Right.
Yeah, so I became aware of, all these guys, Otis Rush, Magic Sam. I saw Magic Sam about a month before he died.
Where was that?
He played at Claremont Men's College in Claremont, California. He played on this patio. And there wasn't very many people there to see him, maybe 10 or 15 people. And he was stuck over in the corner. They threw a rug down on the cement. And he had a white guy playing bass that...
Barlow, I think was his name.
Huh?
I think his name was Port Barlow, if I've got the right name.
Buffalo Bruce Barlow.
Bruce Barlow.
And he went on to play with Commander Cody. And then I did some country gigs years later, and I told him, I said, I saw you, in 1969 in Claremont with Magic Sam. Yeah, and that was kind of a pickup gig. And Magic Sam had Luther Tucker's metallic blue Strat.
Oh, wow.
And I've heard rumors that Magic Sam couldn't keep a guitar. He's playing Earl Hooker's guitar on that European tour, and somebody told me that the red Epiphone and the white Strat were actually Otis Rush's guitars that he was borrowing.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, I don't know either. That's
yeah, I've heard about that. It seems like if you're going to be a true great blues artist, you cannot own a guitar. You have to have it on 90% of the time. Oh man,
that lets me out.
So that was your So your
many guitars.
First band is Seeing Cotton. Your first, legitimate black blues band from Chicago, Seeing Cotton. Then you see Magic Sam, and then.
Well, I was very lucky growing up where I did, because we were 10 minutes from Claremont, and I believe the guy responsible for bringing all those acts out. There's a guy named Denny Bruce, and he later managed the Fabulous Thunderbirds.
Yeah.
But he was booking all the clubs in LA, and booking Lightning Hopkins at the Ash Grove and Albert Collins at the Cheetah. And so he would bring them out to Claremont. And I saw Lightning Hopkins 3 or 4 times. The story, I was about 15, didn't have a driver's license, and my mother worked in Claremont. And Lightning was playing that night at McKenna Hall. And my mother said she would take me up and drop me off. Said, but you'd be out here at the curb at 10 o'clock. Yeah, okay. Of course I wasn't. So she came in looking for me. And, we're all sitting on the floor staring up at Lightning. And so we get home, and my mother tells my dad, he goes, Harry, I don't know what's got into Jeff. First it was the Beatles and the Stones, and now here's this old colored guy with a bottle of whiskey and a paper bag under his chair. Now, see, my dad grew up in the Piedmont district of North Carolina, and he was taught guitar by this wandering black guy that would wander through town, and my dad worked at the gas station at the edge of town, and he called this guy Uncle Lewis, which is kind of, it's not the best thing you can address somebody with. But he said Uncle Lewis would come through town 2 or 3 times a year, and he would give my dad guitar lessons.
Oh, wow.
So my dad was kind of aware of that stuff,
Yeah. Was your dad a good musician?
No, at least not, because he put the guitar away. He did the right thing. He put the guitar away, got a degree, got a job, had 3 kids, a house, 2 cars,
Yeah. How about any of your siblings? Did they play guitar?
Yeah. My brother, I have 2 brothers. They're both younger than me. And the next oldest, Todd, is actually a great guitar player. He studied classical music, and he also played accordion and trumpet. And he was in a band in the 80s called The Unforgiven. I don't know if you ever heard of them.
That's familiar.
They were kind of a guitar army. I don't know what you would call them. Spaghetti Western influences. But he turned out to be a very good country player. But then he gave it up. And then my youngest brother, Kurt, who does stage production, he had a punk band back in the late 70s, early 80s. And he had kind of a southern rock band called the Honky Tonk Angels. And then he had a band called the Flamethrowers. So yeah, we're all musical.
Interesting.
I was the only one that actually stuck with it and made a living with it. So.
I'm glad we're doing this interview because I didn't even know you had siblings. This is good.
Oh, okay.
Good to know.
Yeah, Kurt's my brother Kurt, the youngest one, the punk rocker. He's around on Facebook. If you ever see Kurt M. Ross,
okay,
like on my page or something, that's my brother.
Okay. Now, did you ever? At what point did you start? Really playing out and playing blues out. You said you started with a country band or something.
No, well, when I was 19. Well, let me back up a little bit. The summer of 1970, I left home. I had actually before, like in the spring, in May of 1970, I quit school. I was flunking all my classes anyway. I don't have a high school diploma. And Dangerous Daryl, right?
Oh, yeah.
Daryl Dunmore.
My good buddy.
Well, he used to play with this guy, Mario Rakatani. We called him Rock. And these guys knew these people that lived up in Laurel Canyon in Greta Garbo's old house. And we used to go up there on the weekends and jam with them. And they invited me to come stay with them. So I left home and I hung out in Hollywood for about 6 or 7 months. Then I went back to the Inland Empire. And it was when I came back to the Inland Empire, I met Rick Vito. Now, Rick Vito knew this guy that I knew in Ontario, this guy Tom Clark. Tom Clark had gone to college with Rick Vito in Pennsylvania. Rick is from Philly. And so Rick got the gig with Delaney and Bonnie, and he came out here, and he was staying at Todd Rundgren's house. And because I think he used to be in a band with Todd Rundgren before the Nazz called Woody's Truck Stop. It was a blues band. So he knew Todd very well. He was staying at Todd's house, and he would take the bus out to visit us. And I idolized Rick Vito. I mean, he knew all the Peter Green licks, and he had a 1958 Les Paul, and he had the gig, you know. And he was like everything I wanted to be, you know. And he was a killer guitar player.
Yeah.
And
he would later go on to play with Mick Fleetwood too. So
yeah, he played with Fleetwood Mac. I mean, he's the guy. He played with Dolly Parton. He played with Bonnie Raitt for years.
Okay. I've actually had him. We did a couple of shows together, and he brought a great rhythm section. We had.
Yeah, great guitar, great slide player. He's one of the best slide players ever.
Oh yeah, he's incredible.
But he went back home for the Christmas holidays. It was probably about 71, 72 maybe. And when he came back, he didn't have his Les Paul. I said, "Where's your Les Paul?" He goes, "Oh, I traded it for this Telly." And he had this old 50s Telly that it looked like it had been spray painted red. It was kind of a funky red finish. And he goes, "I've been getting into some country playing and some James Burton." All right, James Burton, that Ricky Ticky guy. Was, you know, we all knew who James Burton was from like the Shin Dogs and from Ricky Nelson, you know, the Ozzie and Harriet show.
Right.
And that just wasn't cool, you know, in the age of Clapton and Hendrix, you know, that ticky kind of. Well, Rick starts playing this country stuff and starts doing these bends. And I just went, "Whoa, what is that? You got to show me that." And he showed me the intro to Honky Tonk Woman that I can't play on here because wound G.
You want to grab your electric? Do you have that nearby?
No, that's okay. Yeah, I mean, you get the idea. And I mean, I just fell out. I thought that was the greatest thing I'd ever seen. And he started talking about this guy, Roy Buchanan. Oh, you need to get this Roy Buchanan record. So I did that, and Roy Buchanan did a version of the Merle Haggard tune, "Lonesome Fugitive," and I learned all that stuff. And I had a girlfriend that lived right across the street from Tom Clark, and her mom was a divorcee, and she was dating this like hardcore redneck guy named Bill. You know, I told Bill, "Man, I'm getting into country music." "Oh, here y'all, I gotta listen to this." And he gave me this Conway and Loretta album and the Johnny Paycheck Jukebox Charlie.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and so I did this hard left turn. And what happened was, where I grew up out in the Inland Empire, there were more country bars than 7-Elevens. And I just started going to all the country bars. And then people start asking me for my phone number, and they start calling me for gigs. And then I got this really good paying gig. It was like a 5-night-a-week gig. We had to wear uniforms, and it was this place called Dick Porter's Country Palace out in Riverside. And all of a sudden I'm in this thing, you know, but I still love blues. And then I found out about Rod Piazza that when I was in high school, I had the Dirty Blues Band album with Rod Piazza, and he was playing at the Red Baron Steakhouse at the Riverside Airport, which was like 15 minutes down the freeway from Dick Porter's Country Palace. And sometimes on Sunday nights, if it was slow, Dick would let us go early, and I would go down and hang out with Rod Piazza. And this was years before Bacon Flat, the Flying Saucer Band, and of course the Mighty Flyers. And Honey was married to the guitar player. Robert Alexander, and I don't know if she wants me telling him, but her real name is Debbie.
Okay.
And I used to go down and sit in with those guys, and Richard Ennis was on drums, and Willie Brenly was on bass. And Robert Alexander and Daryl Dunmore were the first guys I saw that could do the Robert Jr. stuff and the Louis Myers. Robert was really into Louis Myers. In fact, he and Honey made a pilgrimage to Chicago, and she hung out with Otis Spann, and he hung out with Louis Myers. And I always wanted to learn that stuff, but I never did because I didn't. I wasn't playing blues for a living.
So what year was this that you were out there hanging with Rod and those guys? What year was it?
That would have been 73, 74.
Okay.
Then about a year later, I get a call from Rod, and he wants to rehearse a band, but he wants to step away from the pure Chicago blues, Little Walter type format. And we were rehearsing like Sea Jam Blues and Sissy Strut and all these kind of, for 1975, that was pretty eclectic stuff.
Yeah.
But at that same time, the band that was playing at Dick Porter's Country Palace, we got this gig playing all the radio and TV commercials for Miller's Outpost, which was this huge clothing chain back in the 70s.
Oh.
And we were in some of their commercials and did all the grand openings at the stores and stuff. And it was really good money, and we got free clothes. And it started conflicting with the rehearsals with Rod. And I told him that I was going to have to bow out. And we got in an argument about, basically the argument was, well, you're prostituting yourself by playing music that you don't like just to make a living. Well, at least I'm playing music, and you're prostituting yourself by working in a camper shell factory. Turns out Rod was right. I should have listened to him, because I just kept going down that road. And, back in those days, I liked the music, but I didn't love it. I loved blues. And so I just kept going down that road all through the 70s. Played with a couple of Elvis impersonators in the 70s. And then on my 30th birthday, I was playing in a top 40 band out in Ridgecrest, out in the high desert. And it hit me. I'm 30 years old, and I'm making a living, but I'm just playing in these bars. And that was right about the time the Stray Cats hit. And my younger brother, Kurt, brought home the first Stray Cats record, and I listened to that, and I go, well, that's the same stuff I've been playing in these country bars for 10 years. I can do that. So I put together a rockabilly trio with John Jorgensen on upright bass, and we made a little demo tape, and I started driving into Hollywood and passing the demo tapes out. And I get this frantic call one afternoon from this guy, Art Fine. Do you know who Art Fine is?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. He had a night at the Club Lingerie, which was on Sunset Boulevard near Cahuenga. And he had a rockabilly night. I think it was Tuesday night. And he would have like 3 or 4 rockabilly bands. And he decided to put out a rockabilly compilation called LA Rockabilly. And he goes, this original song that I wrote and did a cheesy demo recording for, he wants to put it on this record. And I said, wow, great. We'll go back in and redo it. No, it's going to press in 3 days. You got to give me your permission. I said, man, this is a crappy demo. He goes, believe me, it sounds as good as anything else on the record. So I, okay, go ahead. And so that song was on the LA Rockabilly album. So I started
What was the name
playing.
of that song?
Huh?
What was the name of that song?
It was called "You Better Surrender."
You think I guess?
I haven't even thought it. Nickel in my pocket, 20 more at home. Come on, baby, don't you leave me all alone. You better surrender, surrender, surrender. Ooh, to me. I haven't even thought of that song in years.
Let me ask you something. What
Yeah.
percentage back in around that time? This is like around 1982. You're saying
Uh-huh.
what percentage of like Southern California would you say is country music, and rockabilly roots music versus blues and whatever?
Well, it was pretty segregated, but uh, guys like James Harmon and Rod Piazza, because they had a retro look, they kind of got in that door with the rockabilly guys.
Right. Right.
Man, they had a huge. I used to see James Harmon with those Dangerous Gentlemen's
Mhm.
at Laundry at that time in 1982. I don't think he ever did a rockabilly night, but he definitely played there a few times, and that was with Kid and Fats.
Right.
And man, they turned head, like especially Dave Gonzalez. We used to play, the Shakin' Snakes used to play double bills with the Paladins. They were like our favorite band. We would go down to San Diego and do shows with them.
Mhm.
And they were a four-piece back in those days. They had a singer, a guy named Whit, and they were country rockabilly.
Oh wow.
But man, Dave Gonzalez saw Kid and Hollywood Fats, and just
And he was influenced by them, huh?
yeah. So, and once again, I was still in love with the blues, and I would see James Hart. I would go down to what was that place in Laguna, the White House, White Horse, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Right, now Rod and the Mighty Flyers. He now has the Mighty Flyers in '82 with Junior Watson. There's Junior Watson, Bill Stuve, and Billy Schwartz, who quit and moved to Nashville and started playing with Tom T. Hall. It's it's just weird how people change like that.
Yeah.
Now I got a story for you. When I was playing with Kelly Willis, she was a rockabilly singer from Austin, and this was around '92, '93. We did a little tour with the Fabulous Thunderbirds, and that was back when Duke Robillard and Kid Bangham were playing with the Thunderbirds. And I remember finishing our set one day and walking down the steps, and Duke and Kid are standing there going like that because they dug my country licks,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure if I would have played blues in front of those guys, but and I started talking to him, and Kid Bangham's going, man, I wish I could do what you're doing. Now, this is after I had come home from Nashville and the Bellamy Brothers, and I was trying desperately to break into the LA blues scene. This was back when the Red Devils were called the Blue Shadows, and they were down at the King. And the blues thing had hit hard in LA, like in the late 80s. And I wanted to get back here. I said, man, see, the Bellamy Brothers, bless their hearts, they're a couple of the greatest guys in the world, and they're great at what they do. They're great songwriters. But man, that scene and that music ain't for me. It's just not my thing.
And they were straight up country?
They were pop 70s country. They had like 3 or 4 songs on that Urban Cowboy soundtrack.
Oh, okay.
They were like pop country. And then they had a pop hit first called Let Your Love Flow. I don't know. Well, there's a reason for the warm, sunny nights or something like that. It was a huge hit in the 70s. And also turn for the sunshine, there's a reason why I'm feeling so.
Everybody remembers that song.
Yeah.
Cool.
So,
You're playing with them in where? In Texas?
well, I started with them in '88, and I played with them through 1990. And they flew me down to Nashville and auditioned me. I got the gig because of my steel licks. They wanted a guy that could play the steel licks. Their guitar player was quitting, and they wanted to fire their steel player and consolidate.
Show us a couple of your steel licks.
Now I have to change guitar.
Yes.
So you want to hold that. Can you hear that? I can't hear you.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Oh, there you go. Okay. So Rick Vito showing me Honky Tonk Woman. Yeah. But that technique is the basis for most steel licks. You anchor two notes and then bend a third. Now, a few months after that, I was giving rock and roll guitar lessons at this music store in Pomona, and I was hanging out in the front room one day, and David Lindley came in. And we knew Dave from Claremont, and he said, "Hey, what have you been up to?" And I said, "Oh man, I've gotten into country music, and I want to play steel licks." And he goes and grabs a guitar off the wall. He goes, "Yeah, well, you know, guys out in LA are doing that." And he showed me this one. And see, that's where you anchor the A string and the D string with your third and fourth finger. Then you pull down on the G string. So see you're actually making that chord. But that's basically the technique. You know, you anchor two notes and bend the third, usually the G string.
Yeah.
So that's how I got the gig with the Bellamy's. They wanted somebody that could play the regular guitar parts and all the steel stuff on their records. So after the audition, they took me out to their bus and they said, "We like the way you play. We'd like to hire you, but we don't want somebody just to blow through town," which was kind of what I was thinking about doing, like maybe 6 months at the most. And I said, "Well, what kind of a commitment are you looking for?" And they said, "Well, some of our guys have been with us 11 years. And I just went, They said, "Well, can you give us 2 years?" And I didn't answer right away. I just sat there and thought. And my life had kind of turned to shit here in LA. I'd split up with my wife, and I moved a girlfriend in, and that wasn't working out. And just I had been playing with Rosie Flores, and then that ended. And so I thought, I just need to get out of Dodge for a while. So I committed for 2 years, but I was so miserable. I spent all my money on girls, rental cars, and guitars. And by the end of 2 years, not only did I not have any money, but I was in debt to David Bellamy for almost $2,000 because he would loan me his gold card to buy guitars or rental cars or whatever. Because the thing about the Bellamys, they never played city centers. And like when we stayed in Chicago, we'd always stay out in Des Plaines, out by the airport. And so I was marooned. And sometimes they would have 2 or 3 days off. So 2 or 3 days off at the Holiday Inn in Des Plaines when Chicago is beckoning, you know.
Right. So you never
So,
got to go into Chicago?
huh?
Never got to go into Chicago?
I went in all the time.
Oh, okay.
I rented cars, or if it was early enough, I took the L. You know.
Well, this is in the 80s.
This was the 80s, 88, 89. You know.
You remember who you saw back then, blues-wise?
Well, I remember one night James Cotton had a place called the Cotton Club, and I went down there, and he had hit a rough patch. You know, he had to sit down. He was out in the audience. Like, you know, I got to jam with him and a couple of the guys from the Kinsey Report. And then one night, I went into Chicago and I saw Otis Rush at. Now, which was the one across the street from the Kingston Mine? Was that Blues or Blues Etc.?
That's the original one, Blues. Yeah.
Blues. Okay, so now I saw him at the other one, Blues Etc.
Right.
And it was a Saturday night, and I walked in, and the place was empty, man. There were some people sitting at the bar, and he's sitting at a table with like 3 or 4 people. And I was hoping to talk to him, but you know, I heard that he could be kind of so I saw him sitting there, and I thought, man, I just gotta talk to him. So I went up, and I'm standing there, and he's looking up at me, and I said, Otis, I'm just your biggest fan. And I said, my favorite thing that you ever did was the stuff that you did on Chicago, the Blues Today. And as I'm saying this, he's like scrunching his face up, like, and he's looking at me. He goes, "You like that?" And I said, "Yeah, man, it's my favorite stuff." And he goes, "Why?" And I said, "Your guitar tone on that, it's just different. It's like a clean." He goes, "Let me tell you something. I had a temperature of 104 degrees that day. I had a sore throat. I was sick as a dog. And these Lawrence Welk people wouldn't let me turn my amp up. And that's why it sounds like that." What I wanted to know was, excuse me, a few months before I was at the Jazz Mart, and they had a big poster of Otis Rush by the door with him playing a Jaguar. And I asked Bob, I said, "Man, do you think that's because the poster was right around the time of Chicago the Blues Today? And do you think that's what he played on those cuts?" And he goes, "Yeah, I think so." So I started collecting Jaguars, and they sort of sounded like that.
Right.
So I said, "Otis, what guitar did you use on that?" And he goes, that was my Epiphone." I go, "Are you sure it wasn't a Jaguar?" And he goes, "Well, I was there, wasn't I?"
Let me play a cut from that so people know what we're talking about.
Here he goes. Settle.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to play a cut from that.
Control. Oh, so done.
It's a commercial. Sorry. I'm getting these off of YouTube.
Yes, this is a mean world. To try to live by yourself. Yes, this is a mean world. To try to live by yourself. You can't get the one you're loving. You have to use somebody else. Yes, I hate to remember what a fool I used to be. Yes, I hate to remember what a fool I used to be. Just the way I used to love you, darling. Honey, oh, girl, you treated me. Yes, I would cry about you, baby.
So,
And that's Luther Tucker on the Chukka Chukka
right,
rhythm.
incredible rhythm. It's like
Yeah.
they both have kind of the same tone, so they're
Uh-huh.
kind of like canceling each other out sometimes, or confusing you. So what's going on here? I remember when I first heard that that was about 1992.
Uh-huh.
I was in Santa Fe, New Mexico, visiting my mother, and I walked into a bookstore, and they had that playing over the intercom, over the radio, or over the PA system. And I was like, wait a minute, what is that? That freaked me out. That was, it doesn't sound like an Epiphone for sure, like a hollow body. It sounds like a Strat,
Yeah. Well, on one of my forays into Chicago, I went to Maxwell Street, and there was a guy that had all these card tables lined up with all these cassette tapes, and I got.
Oh yeah. Here you go.
And I've had this on. I bought this record when I was in high school on vinyl. Then I had this, and then I had the complete set where it had volumes 1 through 3, I think,
Right.
on CD.
I got the first volume on vinyl, or actually on cassette, in 1985. So that was a gift to me by someone.
Wow.
So I had that for a long time, but it took 7 years to get volume 2. When I heard that, I freaked out. And I eventually moved to Chicago and would see Otis also, but I never really, I never thought to ask him what guitar he was playing, or what amp. Didn't you tell me that he played that on that record? He's playing a twin, like with volume down low.
And that's why he was kind of bitching about the fact that they wouldn't let him turn it up, because the Vanguard, that was the Lawrence Welk people, and the blues had hit big, and so they saw a cash cow. But they didn't know anything about those artists, They didn't know how to record them. And the engineers were freaking out that it was pegging their needles, So they kept telling him to turn down. And, I know I've been there.
When you say Lawrence Welk people, you mean that was the, they were the what? They owned the label?
Yeah, Lawrence Welk owned Vanguard.
Oh, okay.
And that's the type of music that they recorded, So they weren't used to, they wanted the money, but they wanted to do it their own way.
So now we're like, anything else you saw in Chicago that you liked around that time? Because that's Chicago in the late 80s was still like the 50s and 60s. Everybody was still alive, basically,
I saw Sunnyland Slim and Pinetop Perkins at the Blues across the street from Kingston Mines. I got into a couple of jam sessions at Kingston Mines. I ate my favorite hot dogs in the world at the Wiener Circle on Clark and Diversey.
Yep, that place has been there for a long time. Still,
yeah. I love that place. And there's always fights out on the sidewalk. That's
right.
Late at night. It's an after bar place, And every single time I've been there late at night, there's been a fight.
Right.
And I took Steve Fazio and his brother Chris. Those are the Vero Amp guys. They're from Joliet.
Oh.
And I think I was in I must have been. I think we played at what's the club out in Berlin? Fitzgerald's. And they had come to see me, and then we drove up to the Wiener Circle. And sure, right when we were getting out of the car, the fight started.
That's because
I've been telling them on the way up there.
People that don't know, that place, the gimmick is that the staff is really abusive to the patrons. That's the gimmick.
Yeah.
So people wind up getting riled up. First, they go in there with knowing that that's the deal, but then they wind up getting sucked up into it and offended, and then they take it out on each other when they go out on the sidewalk. So, okay, getting back to like, so you're playing with those guys, touring out there. This is the Bellamy Brothers we're talking about, and then you're coming.
I played with the Bellamys for almost 3 years. It was like 2 years and 10 months. Okay, what I was going to tell you, because after the end of 2 years, I had nothing to show for it. And so I stayed for an extra 10 months, and I saved my money so I could come home and get a place and get a car and get in that Los Angeles blues scene. I'd gone out to my parents' house, and I found a box of business cards that I had made back in the 70s. And I had the presence of mind back then to have my name and, you know, Jeff Ross, guitarist, then the word phone and a blank line. So here's a box of like 300 or 400 business cards that I can use, you know. Uh-huh. And I went to every blues jam in town and passed out my card and like nothing, like for 2 years. So that's why. And so during that time, I was taking other gigs like Kelly Willis in Austin. Then I got the gig with the Desert Rose Band, and that's Chris Hillman from the Byrds and the Flying Burrito Brothers. He had put together a band with my friend John Jorgensen, and I don't know if you know who Herb Peterson is.
I don't know.
Herb Peterson is a legend. He was a bluegrass musician, but he also, you know, he was in the early LA country rock scene. He's the banjo player on the Eagles version of Take It Easy. You know, the Jackson band. Running down the road, trying to loosen my load. Got world of trouble on my mind.
Song called Wait a Minute, 1976.
Wait a minute, did I hear you say?
Yeah, that's her. Yes. Oh, what year is that?
I'm just going to keep interjecting. So
okay.
Wow.
And the guy is a monster musician. He's a national treasure. So it was the Desert Rose Band was started with Chris Hillman from the Byrds and the Burrito Brothers and Herb Peterson and my pal John Jorgensen. And they had a few hits in the mid to late 80s. And then like all things, you know, it just wound down. And Chris and Herb went on hiatus for a year or so. And then they got back together. And John didn't want to do it. And J.D. Manis, the steel player, didn't want to do it. So they got Tom Brumley. And Tom Brumley was the steel player on all the Buck Owens Buckaroos stuff. But you've probably heard him on the Ricky Nelson Garden Party. Remember the song Garden Party by Ricky Nelson?
You'll hear it now.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Working out at home.
Oops.
That's not it.
They always put an ad before.
Went to a garden party, reminisced with my old friends. When it got to the garden party.
Yeah, all right.
That's it. Well, that's Tom Brumley. And when I went out on the road with Desert Rose, he was the steel player, and that's really the reason why I took the gig, because Chris called me, and I turned him down. No, Herb called me first, and I said, no, you know. Plus, now John Jorgensen, when he was in the band, he played guitar, baritone guitar, mandolin, sang the high harmony. You know, I don't do any of that. And that's what I said, Herb, I don't do any of that stuff. You know, I don't think I'm your guy. So we hang up, and the phone rings again, and it's Chris, and he's all indignant. He goes, oh, nonsense. Just we're up at the Alley. It's this rehearsal studio up on Lancashire. He goes, come on up. We're auditioning drummers, and we're going to have Tom Brumley on steel. Now, Tom Brumley is one of my heroes, and I thought, well, I got to check this out. Now, there's a Buck Owens tune that Emmylou Harris had a hit with called "Together Again," and the original Buck Owens tune, I learned Tom's pedal steel intro note for note. And one day it's,
Nice, beautiful.
One day at sound check, I said, Tom had this great rig. He had these two reissued Tweed Basemans, and he had taken the 10s out of one and put a 15 in it. And he had them on both sides of them. And his sound was just big and fat. I said, man, let me play my guitar through your rig. So he did, and I played that lick. And, you know, Tom's a good old boy. You know, he comes up to me and goes, I didn't think you could do that on the guitar. Thanks, Tom.
You do such a good job on that on the lap steel stuff.
Well, I really liked it a lot, and I wanted to play pedal steel back in the early '70s, and the picks and the volume pedal and the bar and the knee levers and the pedals on this. Oh no, man, I can't do this. And I knew this guy, Bobby Warford, Doc Warford. He was Linda Ronstadt's guitar player in the early '80s. And there's a guy, Gene Parsons. He was the drummer for the Byrds during the Sweethearts of the Rodeo era in the '60s. And he invented this thing he and Clarence White kind of collaborated, called the Parsons White string bender. And it was this like Rube Goldberg thing, and it hooked onto your Strat. Your guitar was routed out and had these bars and springs and stuff like that, and then it was connected to your B string with a little thing like that. And so when you pulled down on your strap, it would pull back that string, and that's the sound it would give. And I tried Bobby's, and I can't do this either. I cannot pull and play at the same time. And I said, you know what? I'm gonna learn to do this on the guitar. And there were a few guys with those benders. Albert Lee had come to town in the early '70s to play with the Everly Brothers. And Don Everly used to have a jam session, a celebrity jam session, out at this place in Calabasas. And I would go out there and watch Albert Lee. And I said, you know what? Not only am I going to learn to do that with just my fingers, but I'm going to quit listening to all the B-bender licks guys, and I'm going to listen to steel players. And I'm going to put the record on, and I'm going to fool myself into believing that that's a guitar and those notes are on here somewhere, and I'm going to find them. And that's how I learned that stuff. And then I got the Bigsby to mimic the shimmer of the bar. And then I use a volume pedal to give it that kind of swell. Now, there were some guys that I just couldn't rip off, like Buddy Emmons. They're just so technically over the top. But guys like Ralph Mooney, who played with Buck Owens in the early days before Tom, and Ralph Mooney played with Waylon Jennings like all through the '70s. There's a Waylon Jennings song called "Rainy Day Woman." And I learned all that stuff. And I sat with Ralph Mooney at a bar. You may know this place down at the end of Chicago, like between Chicago and Gary, Indiana. There was this huge shopping center that had one of those theaters in the round, where the stage went around like that. And we played with Waylon Jennings there when I was with the Bellamy Brothers. And there was a bar in that shopping mall. And I was walking by, and there was Moon sitting at the bar. So I went and tried to talk to him, but the guy was a drunk. And I was asking him questions, and he's wanting to buy me a drink. No, wait till Congress. Bring this guy another beer. And I said, Ralph, I don't drink, man. Come on. But man, tell me about how you did that one lick. And it was a complete waste of time. But
so around talking about the late '80s now, you came back to Los Angeles.
I came back to Los Angeles the end of '90 or early '91, and so, like I said, for a couple of years I tried to break into the blues scene. But see, I had been gone for 3 years, and there were people that didn't know me, and I knew some of the people because in the early '80s during the rockabilly thing. I also played with Top Jimmy and the Rhythm Pigs. And then I played with Carlos Guitarlos and his bands, And so, I knew Bill Bateman and, the Blasters and all those guys.
Do you have any specific crazy memories about the Top Jimmy gigs?
Oh, yeah. We used to play at this place called the Cafe de Grand. And it was down in the basement, and this was a funky. It was like CBGB's. Yeah, I mean this was a toilet,
right.
And Jimmy would get so wasted by the second set he'd have to grab a chair and sit it out on the dance floor, and he'd just sit there like this. And it was choreographed. It was like every night that he did that. I don't know if you know who El Duce was, but El Duce had a band called the Mentors. And they were like this death metal punk rock, completely debauched thing. And El Duce would see him and go to the bar and get a pitcher of beer and come over and pour it on Top Jimmy's head. And Jimmy was fine with that. I mean, I saw him do that half a dozen times. One night, Jimmy's got his overalls on, and he's got his cigarettes in his bib, and his cigarettes get wet. And now he freaks out, and he gets up and he starts fighting with El Duce, and they're rolling around on the dance floor. It's,
Was that pretty packed in there? That was like Sunday nights or something, right?
Oh, that was like a Thursday night. And it was a basement, and it had this low ceiling, and it would get hot and sweaty in there. And, yeah, it would get packed.
Was it a celebrity kind of hangout at all? Or?
Yeah, one night David Lee Roth came down and sat in with us. And it was Carlos's birthday. And David Lee had bought Carlos a tipple for his birthday. And a tipple is kind of like between a ukulele and a tenor guitar. It's like a big ukulele. And towards the end of the night, Carlos is chasing David Lee around in the foyer upstairs going, "Look, David Lee, look what I can do." And he's like doing hammer-ons on this tipple. And David Lee's going, "Get away." Yeah, so.
Okay, so we're like around 1992 here.
Well, no, that's in the early 80s. That was around 82, 83. And then I got the gig with Levi Dexter. Levi was this British guy. He had a group called Levi and the Rockettes, and they were playing in London. And Dave Edmunds took Brian Setzer and company down to this club to see them and said, "This is what you guys need to be doing." And they became the Stray Cats.
Oh, okay.
And then Levi moved to Los Angeles, and we had what everybody called Levi's big band, because we had Bob Roberts, the tattoo guy, the famous tattoo guy, that played sax. He played sax on the first Mothers of Invention album, the Freak Out record. And then my friend John Jorgensen also played sax.